Martin Popoff here. Welcome back to another episode of the Contrarians. This is a bit of a special episode. We haven't done this before, but a lot of people are asking for a review from us of 72 Seasons, the new Metallica album. I had to actually go on WGRF 97 Rock with Tom and talk about the first four songs when they came out last week, and now the whole album is out. And I believe I'm going to be going back on again to talk about the rest of the album. The album came out yesterday. I'm doing this the next day. And so basically, yeah, we'll go through it in order. But yeah, the whole idea with this, it's kind of funny. It would almost be more fun reviewing the reviews because there's been a lot of reviews. And it's interesting seeing all the the vague dissatisfaction or the people loving it to death, or that there's a lot of interesting points have been made. Hopefully I'm going to make some interesting points as well. But my overall impression, first of all, okay, so people are talking about the packaging. It is very yellow, but it is kind of neat and clean. I think they've put a lot of thought into it. They're trying to do something different with that. Same with the whole concept. The 72 Seasons thing is a pretty cool idea of James, is how he's talking about the first 18 years sort of affect your life or set your life up. He had a pretty pretty tough childhood. But the interesting thing is, I think that whole idea of that first 18 years, the music that you're into in that 18th year, the 16, 17, 18th, really sort of sets you up for what you're going to do. And I think Metallica almost as a metaphor for that idea of forming the personality. It actually forms the personality of this album. I mean, there's talk, you hear them say, "Oh, that's our new wave of British heavy metal song" or whatever. But I find you definitely get a fair bit of that with this album. I find this album to be a very conservative Metallica. I think it's overall it's a record that sort of takes I remember talking to Phil Anselmo once about Pantera. It's all about the money riff kind of thing, and to me, this, you definitely hear the money riff a lot on this. You hear a riff that feels good at a tempo that feels good to Lars, and you're getting that a lot. So you're almost getting this. You're almost getting across the record a little bit of that sweet spot between the new wave of British heavy metal and thrash, which is speed metal. So you're getting a little bit of that feel in there as well, along with their sort of Sabbathy things as well that you get more or less from a Kirk. But I don't want to talk too much about the generalities because let's go through it a little bit. So yeah, 72 Seasons kicks off the album. It's a long one, 7:39. The whole album's long. It's 77 minutes long. It's kind of like the other ones. Greg Fiedelman is producing again. We'll get into the production hopefully a little bit as we go along. But yeah, so it kicks off with the title track. You get a little bit of that D beat speed thing that Lars does. He likes his drumming on this album is the same kind of drumming that he kind of gets a lot of criticism for, right? Which is that there's a lot of simplicity. The speeds are not too fast, not too slow on this album. So you get a lot of the up tempo, mid tempo thing. But yeah, when he's going fast, he likes to do that D beat thing, boop, 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 kind of thing. And for the fills, the thing people criticize Lars about with is this idea of very often going to the snare and staying with the snare for the fill. So it's a big roll, wind up, single stroke roll, snare roll. And, you do hear some toms on this album. But yeah, it's funny. I remember hearing one section where there's a fill and I know there's going to be another, and then I know there's going to be another. And he goes like, it's a snare fill, and then it's snare with a couple of toms, and then he's back to the snare again. He's using the snare a big amount again, but he's mixing it up a little as well. And we also get the Lars on here. One of the the positive aspects of Lars's drumming style is how often and where he's hitting the crash cymbal as well. So he's doing that a lot all through this album to accentuate things. So yeah, 72 Seasons was one of the songs we got as an advance. Cool riff, marauding. I'm going to use that word marauding a lot because you really get that a lot on here as well. And also you'll notice that when they're doing a fast thing, what they often do, which really smooths out the songs in this album. This is a smooth Metallica album, right? what they do often is they've got the speed, and then they'll do the half speed, but really it's the same speed, right? It's just halftime. So they're not mixing things up a big amount that way. So it's staying in 4/4, but they'll do double time to halftime to double time to halftime, that kind of thing, or time to double time or time to halftime. I guess is more taking out a redundancy in the old double thing. But so that's the first track on it. Shadows Follow is the second one. So here's our first new song. Remember, there were 4 that were trotted out as advances, and if you look on Spotify, wow, I mean, those songs have so much, so many plays. But it's funny how slow people are to stack up the plays, at least on Spotify, on the new songs. But so Shadows Follow, pretty interesting. Putting this here, I think, is maybe a little bit of a mistake, because it's so similar to 72 Seasons with that same mid-tempo. I think it's in the same key. We get a Hetfield Ulrich one on here. That's the other cool thing about here, this album. Most of the songs are Hetfield Ulrich, but Rob's in on, what is it, 3 or 4? Where are my notes here? Anyways, Rob and Kirk are in on the writing on here. I remember interviewing Kirk for I think it was the last album. Yeah, it must have been the last album, right? Where he talked about losing his cell phone and losing all his riffs and having no writing and stuff. So that was pretty crazy. But yeah, so pretty interesting. It's got a typical sort of old school James vocal, and I think you're going to notice across this album that that James is really in an old school pocket on here. He's in a basically a ride and master sort of pocket, and then he's mixing in some really good melodic vocals as well, that go along with some really melodic chord changes as well, that you hear, and people are talking about that being a little pop metal or emo metal or whatever you want to call it, from time to time. I'm seeing sort of some complaints around that sort of situation. The third track in the listing, right? This was another advanced one, Screaming Suicide. So here you've got a James, Lars, and Robert are in on this one. Hetfield talks about this one, saying that there's a little bit of a taboo on the word suicide, and we should talk about dark feelings and that's kind of a theme throughout the album. That's the other thing that's good about this, that raises Metallica over regular thrash, is James really puts a lot of thought into his lyrics and does really good lyrics. So there's really cool personal lyrics throughout this album. It's almost a bit of a concept album that way, I suppose. But yeah, he talks about to communicate the darkness we feel inside of us, further adding how people cannot deny that they had dark thoughts at one point in their lives. To face it is to speak the unspoken. So this is kind of less complex. People have talked about it being a little modern rock. It's slower than Lux Eterna, which is the first one that came out. A little bit of you're starting to hear little bits. I think you hear a little bit of a Call of Cthulhu riff in here, but you definitely hear across this album riffs that are really close to tons of other riffs Metallica has done before. So it's definitely, as we got those first 4 songs, you get these songs, and at 77 minutes of this, with pretty much the same arrangements throughout. I mean, it really is the same arrangements. There's on the last track, there's one kind of mellow jammy moment, but other than that, it's pretty much full speed ahead, but not extreme metal. This is a very easy drinking, conservative, sober Metallica album. So yeah, you get just this basic arrangement throughout the whole album, and even way up into that last track. I mean, that's really as I'm sort of flipping through it, that's kind of where you hear a bit of a twin lead, and you go, well, there doesn't seem to be a lot of twin leads on here. I don't know, maybe I missed a lot of them, but so the arrangement's pretty simple, and so is the production. The production on this, I did a whole podcast episode, my audio podcast, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff. I did one on just Metallica's productions, right? Because they've had so many interesting, thoughtful, we're going to try something different, even Saint Anger production sounds. And this one, I almost feel like this is the most conservative they've ever gotten. So again, it's Greg Fiedelman who did the last album. But but I think you get a little bit of a similarity between this one and the last album and Death Magnetic. All of them are a little bit trying to do the same thing, but those ones were a little more eccentric than this. There's nothing eccentric at all about this production. It's just good, crisp. There's a lot of distortion and roar on the guitars. Lars's drums are absolutely crystalline, very, very clear. His snare's got to be clear. He loves the snare so much. So that's super clear. The cymbals are clear. The bass is really attacky, a little bit, Vinnie Paul on that, or Justice. That's the other thing. I always say, oh, Vinnie Paul, oh, you came up with that sound. I mean, it was there on Justice kind of thing, right? As well. But so that's kind of cool. Where are we in the track list here? So number 4. So yeah, Sleepwalk My Life Away. This is a bit of a slower one, a little bit of Black Album. So they're bringing that up as well. So like I say, you're really starting to hear across this album that it's a mix of all the most accessible moments and all the most conservative and feel good moments and press that button of the headbanger moments across Ride, Master, Black Album. Certainly, I don't think you get any Saint Anger or really Load or Reload on this at all. And you definitely get a lot of Hardwired and Death Magnetic on it, which makes sense as an evolution. You don't really get any Kill 'Em All, although I definitely spotted a kind of Seek and Destroy riff in here somewhere as well. Where are we here? You Must Burn. Where are my main? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, even more slow. So this is slower, even more Black Album. Black Sabbath, again, I remember hearing some toms, but there's still a lot of snare fills. Yeah, so they do that Black Sabbath thing where, you heard all leading up to the Black Album, and you heard a lot of it on the Black Album. And it's a kind of, it's almost like a modern Tony Iommi, like from the Tony Iommi solo album, or even from 13. It's kind of a weird, when we say they are doing Sabbath, you really hear it on the last one. I mean, in a Murata, which is 11:10 long, so they got this super long one at the end. That one really has kind of a Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath vibe to me, and that's the one where you hear that cool twin lead as well. So yeah, Lux Eterna is next. We've all heard that one. That was the first one. That's the fastest one, the most sort of ace of spades all of them, and that's one I think they self-described as a new wave of British heavy metal song. I don't think it's very new wave British heavy metal. I saw this one even described as pop punk, pretty crazy. But yeah, I think you definitely get an ace of spades sort of beat to it, but it's just a good fast song. It's produced, performed, recorded, super tight, and again very shiny. This is a very glossy Metallica album, but glossy, like I say, in the way that it's a really simple arrangement. It's bass, couple guitars and vocals and drums, and that's it right through the entire album. But just so easy drinking in its production, right? Crown of Barbed Wire. Odd, cool melody here as well, then into sort of a crushing, cool riff. I think this is the weirdest one on here. Again, it's got that example of double time, but here when he goes double time, he goes to kind of like a 1 and 3 riff rather than a standard rock and roll 2 and 4 snare on 2 and 4 kind of thing. Melodic singing, kind of cool, and again, it goes to that sort of anguished, tortured, persecuted sort of lyric that James does so well. Chasing Light might be my favorite riff on the album. Very cool riff, fast mid-tempo. Again, I think back to their days when they used to cover Savage, right, and Diamond Head and stuff. So you really hear their love for that up tempo, and how I use that term Geronimo riff fairly often. I think you hear some Geronimo riffs on here as well. So you hear a little bit of that, which I ascribe to like early Europe, Swedish frostcore. So you get a little bit of that mixed in. So you get a little bit of new wave of Swedish heavy metal from 84, 85, 86 mixed in with the new wave of British heavy metal, but the new wave of British heavy metal that is A, money riff, and B, virgin on speed metal. As I really don't hear a lot of thrash on this album of any sort. Maybe that's testimony to how far metal has come, and how far even just thrash itself has come. So many thrash bands over the years, and there's more of a thrash songbook now, and Metallica has really moved away from that. It doesn't matter, they actually aren't very fast on this album all over the place, but even when they're fast, like I say, it's got more of a speed metal vibe, I think, to me. Okay, Of Darkness Had a Son. This was another one that was one of the advanced ones. So this was teased on February 28th. This was the one that they did the TikTok thing where the guys would all join in, the bass drums clomping away or whatever, and they're all joining in. Pretty innovative idea. But again, military snare, that thumping bass intro, interesting vocal, cool chord changes again in this song. That's the other thing I want to mention about Metallica. They're kind of a big band, if you haven't noticed. And I think they're kind of famous because in the thrash world, they established right away, not on the first album, but on the second album, Ride the Lightning, they established right away that I think they were the greatest songwriters in thrash, and they're still the greatest songwriters in thrash. And you really hear that they're like I say, tweaking in a little bit of a different way as advanced guys, around 60 years old kind of thing. So they're bringing into it the music they liked, not any of the 70s music they liked growing up at that age, but they're really bringing into it, that British and Swedish thing, like I talked about. So, but again, there's, I guess the deeper point of that is they're bringing in the stuff, the super highlights of all their favorite new wave of British heavy metal and maybe Swedish things. To again give you that idea of delivering you money riff after money riff after money riff, which brings up kind of a point where this is just like four guys making a record. You can only do so much. It's 77 minutes of invisible air. It's guitar, bass, and drums. You do have parameters. They're not trying to do something completely strange here. So there's definitely going to be a lot of complaints. And like I say, it will almost be more interesting to review all the reviews, because Metallica and Iron Maiden, man, something new comes out, it gets so much discussion, right? So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. That idea of they're going to get a lot of criticism no matter what they do. If it was too weird, so this is something we all asked for, first of all, right? So the idea of we want songs that are shorter and more logical and get going sooner, and they did that. They did that on this record. That was something where they were really getting into that Steve Harris zone. Where, remember Senjutsu, the last three songs are like 10 minutes all each, right? It's like the band basically gave him, said, okay, Steve, you take the back half of the album, sort of thing, right? So this doesn't have any of that. I mean, everything you would think that everything, and it's kind of true, everything over 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and there's a lot of them, you could say, there's a little bit of fat on them or whatever, and they still take a while to get going, but it doesn't feel as illogical and as too many riffs crammed into the songs. There's a lot more sense and tightness, I think, to the songs here. So moving up, number 10 is Too Far Gone with a question mark. This is a Hetfield Ulrich. Like I say, most of them have that writing credit. This is, again, more ways. At this point, you're almost going, how many more ways can they put together the notes and to make well, definitely, like I say, not a thrash riff, not an extreme metal riff, not anywhere near, the hundreds of bands doing things way more extreme, but just to make an accessible heavy metal riff, a pure heavy metal riff. So you're starting to feel, they've got the slide rule out, and they have to work out. I mean, how many riffs do you think we've heard at this point? Someone will do a YouTube video on that, but probably, I don't know. Let's see, we're up the 10th song. So I would say probably 70 riffs so far. So anyways, so this one, this is the second shortest one, up tempo, chugging, again, they really like the chug thing. James is known as the quick right hand, the palm muted. This is the band that kind of invented that in a big way, because I used to say that about thrash versus speed metal. It's like speed metal, thrash is just speed metal with palm muting and with the hi-hat closed. So yeah, Room of Mirrors. As fast as Lux Eterna. So again, kind of the same speed as Lux Eterna, and the same sort of beat where, Lars, goes between that punk hardcore D beat and throwing in a little bit of double bass as well. That's kind of seems to be his thing when he's going fast now. More melodic singing, more interesting chord changes. Halftime, again, that thing about the songs being smoothed out because they go at a speed and then they go half that speed, or they'll go at a speed on a slow song and then they'll speed it up at one point or whatever. Let's see. And then in a Murata, again, 11:10. So they throw the long song at the end. It's a really entertaining long song. I think this is probably my second favorite song on the album. I'm surprised to be saying that with a long song like this, but it's very logically put together. It's very different. It can be very slow. It's very Sabbathy. And again, it's got that sort of hot, heezy, strange, druggy Sabbath feel of Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath to me. So there you go. There's a review for you. It's interesting. Like I say, they're gonna get complaints no matter what. I see Hardwired got mostly good reviews. Death Magnetic, as these things go more in the rear view mirror. Some fans want to elevate an album. They're still taking a long time between albums, right? But they give us super long albums. Like, put it in perspective. Every one of these albums that they put out is slightly longer than two classic era Van Halen albums, right? Or Kiss albums, kind of thing, right? So they're doing doubles all the time. They had Beyond Magnetic. There's little song releases all over the place. And they've given us lots of live albums and symphony stuff and covers. So they're out there making a lot of music. It's just there's this long time between these things, and you can tell they're really thought out when they came out. So yeah, to recap, you're really hearing a conservative, accessible, kind of easy listening Metallica album that sounds like a whole bunch of their money shots, their money riffs, all lined up in a row, but sensibly put together to make great songs. I mean, frankly, most of the, for all the complaining that could be done about Metallica, there was a lot of goodwill thrown at those first four songs, and I think that goodwill will continue. But I do also feel that slight bit of disappointment that wow, you get the whole rest of the songs and some of those blend into the first four, and it's really hard to sort of tell them apart because, like I say, it's got this really conservative production, and the arrangements are, it's pretty much at that 7.75 level of heavy metal intensity all the way through the entire album, kind of thing. So kind of interesting. So, for a grade on this, I've been pretty tough on grades when I do grades. It really does feel like an 8.5 type Metallica album. Nothing to complain about, but just a general complaint, right? So we'll knock off the 1.5 for that. So there you go. There's your review of 72 Seasons. You can like and subscribe and join our Patreon thing, because that's taken on a whole life of its own. So when you join Patreon for Contrarians, that brings you in to, if you want to be part of the panels where we go over these Dark Horse panels. We just did a Kiss one that went over really well for Unmasked. So yeah, join our Patreon situation. Marco's done a great job of setting that all up. And go play the Metallica album, and let me know what you think of this, review in the comments below. Thanks for listening.